Welcome to the third session of the day. May I now invite Ms. Preetha Reddy, Vice Chairperson, Apollo Hospitals, and Dr. Randeep Guleria, Director, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, to the virtual dais. May I request Ms. Preetha Reddy to deliver the welcome address and conduct the session, please.
Dr. Guleria, members of IMA, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. To me, it's particularly an honor to be here along with Dr. Guleria. Dr. Guleria, globally, India has been acknowledged for the tremendous work which has happened over the past 1 year. I had the honor of meeting our distinguished Prime Minister, and the only thing he could speak about was how India has done us proud in every aspect of dealing with the disease, including with the pandemic, and including the fact that our vaccines have been the quickest, fastest, and we have really vaccinated the largest population globally. Dr. Guleria, we know that you have been on the advisory, you have been the true leader in the corona war, and the amount you have done and worked tirelessly 24/7 over the past 1 year is commendable. Thank you so much for being here, and I think the honor is just a small way of us acknowledging the kind of work you have done and the way you have led the teams behind you, not only in the public sector, but I think the private sector also has looked to you to give the direction, to give the scientific inputs, and tell the rest of the country what needs to be done. So I'm delighted to be with you on this panel. The finance minister in her speech said that, you have actually gotten to people's homes, advising them, cheering them up, and being there as a total, a support system. And I think that is so true because all of us watched you every evening whenever we knew that you were going to be there, because honestly, at a point, everybody was frightened. So thank you for truly being there looking after everybody. While I congratulate you on this award, I also know and understand that the healthcare has been a crisis, and not only for India. And I'm proud to be an Indian because India has really done so much better than some of the developed nations. And I think that has been there because we had the trust in a scientific team which said that, this is the way, this is the norm. While there was a bit of concern on the lockdown, I think the advice on the lockdown and implementation of the lockdown actually helped us to be in a better state than we could have been otherwise. So I think the inputs, the advice, the courage has really helped us. We know from, historically you have treated some of the biggest VIPs in the country. But what I would like to say is that you've also treated the common man. You've also set norms for treatment of the common man. And I think that really is commendable because it's a 360-degree approach to delivery of healthcare. And we have learned from you on what has to be done. Post COVID, there was a lot of talk on the economy and how the economy has to be revived and how, we're on a trajectory to really transform ourselves as a country. But the health and economy of a country goes hand in hand. So while we want to say an economically healthy India, we should also, at this session, we will understand that a healthy India is actually an economically healthy India. So I think the healthcare is in good hands in terms of direction. There are challenges, the challenges have come maybe more in the forefront during this time, but I think we learned from that. And as Sanjeev said earlier, that the Y2K crisis, how it catapulted a lot of industries into being able to grow, to be able to sustain things. I think the same situation will happen with healthcare. And the inputs, the way we face challenges will make us a better, a stronger, a more resilient India. And we have already shown the rest of the world that we can actually do it. So with this, I would like to say that, we're so proud to be Indians. We are so proud of the healthcare community and what you have all done for India, and looking forward to hearing from you how we can really take India forward and keep it a truly healthy nation with all the onset of, the multiple factors which come. Thank you so much, Dr. Guleria, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Preetha Reddy, Vice Chairperson, Apollo Hospital. I'm really grateful for your comments. Many of us have really done what we felt was a job, and I'm very happy that India has actually shown the way in many ways as far as COVID-19 is concerned. So and in the pre-talk, there was this whole discussion that we need to really put health as far as India is concerned on the center stage. And I think that becomes more and more important as we start talking of today. I'll just start my talk. Let me just share my screen. Basically, COVID-19 vaccine has been touted as the most effective public health measures to end the pandemic. As a matter of fact, it has been said that it would be the beginning of the end once vaccines were rolled out. Why is it important for us to have vaccines? And that's basically, if you look at this curve, if we really looked at trying to immune person get what we call herd immunity, and with a lot of measures in between in terms of social isolation and other things, wearing a mask, it would still take a very long time for us to have a large number of people who would have immunity. That can really be hiked up with the vaccination, and that is why a vaccine is needed. Also, we're not sure in terms of natural infection, how are the titers of neutralizing antibodies and how long does this immunity last. That is why when vaccines came out in December, it was actually touted as the weapon to win the war as far as US or the world was concerned. Just briefly before we start, I just wanted to really make people get an idea of what is important. When we look at a vaccine, we have three important things that we need to keep in mind. One is the antigen, the antigen which will go into the human body and produce the antibodies which will help us to fight against the virus. And we know that from a lot of literature that the spike protein on the COVID-19 is the one which can produce a large amount of antibodies. The second thing which confuses a lot of people is the platform by which the vaccine is delivered. And we have various platforms. We have the inactivated or killed virus platform. We have the live attenuated virus vaccine platform, the recombinant viral vaccine, the protein subunit vaccine, the VLP, and the DNA vaccine. These are all platforms which actually help to deliver the vaccine into the human body. And they have various routes and regimens. We all know currently we're using the intramuscular route, and we're giving two doses, the initial priming dose and the booster dose as far as vaccine is concerned. And for the first time in the history of mankind, do we have so many viruses, so many vaccines that can expose the body to an antigen that won't cause a disease and will provoke a good immune response. We have inactivated, weakened, the viral vector, and so many other vaccines. If you look at candidates which are available in different categories, we have Covaxin, which is an inactivated vaccine. Sinovac is also an inactivated vaccine. We have a vector-borne vaccine which uses the adenovirus. Covishield uses the chimpanzee adenovirus, and the Sputnik uses the human recombinant adenovirus. And then we have the messenger RNA and the DNA vaccines. Pfizer and Moderna are the messenger RNA vaccines. For the first time in the history, has India become so much involved in R&D as far as vaccine is concerned. India was the manufacturing hub as far as vaccine is concerned. 60% of the global vaccines for children and for pregnant women were provided by India. But the research component, the R&D component was not that strong. But now if you look at what's happening, we have Covishield, which is in collaboration with Oxford and AstraZeneca. Covaxin is a Bharat Biotech vaccine. Zydus Cadila is coming out with their own DNA-based vaccine. Sputnik is basically with Gamaleya Institute that Dr. Reddy Laboratory has collaborated, and we have various other institutes like Biological E, Genovia in Pune, all doing research in collaboration and coming out with so many vaccine candidates. So the vaccine landscape has changed dramatically as far as our country is concerned, from manufacturing to now very aggressive R&D. And because of that, we need to have a lot of preclinical work, which looks at vaccines to animals, monitoring for side effects. The phase 1 trial, which is basically done on a small number of healthy individuals to look for side effects and to really get an idea of the dose. And then a phase 2 trial, which looks at the demographic side effects and the efficacy in terms of COVID-19, the neutralizing antibodies. And then a very large phase 3 trial, which looks at how the vaccine behaves as far as community is concerned. Now, vaccine development has usually taken years, decades as a matter of fact. But because scientists came together, because of the work that had already been done, we had COVID-19 vaccine available in less than 1 year. The rapid pace was enabled by multiple factors. One is prior knowledge, the spike protein in coronavirus. This was already known because of previous work being done on MERS coronavirus and SARS. And new technologies had come had been developed, not for COVID, but even for Ebola and for even MERS coronavirus, which was nucleic acid vaccine technology. And we were able to do a lot of things in parallel rather than sequence in terms of the trials. And therefore, rather than going through a sequence of preclinical phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 studies, these were done in parallel. Safety and efficacy, and a lot of investment was done by governments, by the industry, to really be able to get vaccine as early as possible. And I feel that maybe in the next few months, vaccines will start coming in less than 1 year, maybe 6 months to 9 years. Currently, if you look at vaccine development, there are almost 69 vaccines which are in various clinical development stages, and 181 vaccines which are in preclinical development. Never before we had so many vaccines being looked at for one virus. And this is just to give you a one of the different varieties of vaccine that we're looking at, from protein subunit to viral vector to DNA. There's a whole branch. And if you start looking at the phase of trials that I discussed, they're in different stages as far as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and the approval stage is concerned. But for any country and for anyone that is looking at a vaccine, the program has to look at development and production. What is the capacity to develop and produce the vaccines? Is it affordable for that country? How do we deploy it? Is it feasible considering the cold chain that has to be maintained? And remember, some vaccines need very low temperature. And how do we prioritize as far as vaccine delivery is concerned? These factors become very important for any country, and these were factors which were important for India also when it considered rolling out the vaccine program. If you look at the vaccine production and capacity, if you look at the Pfizer vaccine, they had an estimate of 50 million doses in 2020 and 1.3 billion doses in 2021. The challenge is that this requires minus 70 degrees cold chain maintenance, and it needs 2 doses. The Moderna vaccine, again, the company had said that they could have 20 million doses in 2020 and around 500 million to 1 billion doses in 2021. Again, requires minus 20. But if you look at the Indian vaccines, the AstraZeneca or the Serum Institute vaccine, by 2021, the company is confident that they can have up to 3 billion doses. And this requires just maintenance of 4 to 8 degrees, and therefore distribution, storage and handling of the vaccine can be done using existing infrastructure, and 2 doses are required. Covaxin also, currently around 20 million doses are available, but they have the capacity to really hike this up to 700 million doses. And again, the existing infrastructure is sufficient. So these 2 vaccines seem to be suitable both in terms of the cost and in terms of the distribution, which is very, very important for a country like India. But developing vaccine is only half the work done. Delivering it equitably is the most important step. And this has been shown by a large number of papers, that manufacturing billion of doses is being done, but distributing it in the rich and poor countries is very, very important. And data suggests that if vaccine was distributed only to high-income countries, only 33% of deaths could be averted. However, if the vaccine were distributed to all countries proportionally to the population, we could be able to at least defer 61% of mortality. If you look at the global perspective, and that is something which is a great cause of concern, almost the 5 wealthy nations plus the European Union uh, have more than 50% of the vaccine pre-ordered. As a matter of fact, 10 countries have almost 75% of the vaccine which have been pre-ordered. And if we start looking at the number of doses that have been ordered, for example, Canada has ordered almost 8 doses per person as far as the vaccine is concerned and pre-ordered, and this has been done by US, UK, Australia, even the European Union, that the number of doses ordered has been far more than the number of individuals living in that country. WHO started the COVAX program. It has secured 700 million doses, and this is basically to distribute it to different parts of the world. And AstraZeneca also has pledged a not-for-profit supply of doses varying from $3 to $4. If you look at the cost comparison of various vaccines that are available, you'll see that the Bharat Biotech vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine are the ones which are really affordable. And I mentioned that cost is a big issue. As we go up, we find that the cost really goes up when we start looking at the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, and also if you start looking at the Sinopharm vaccine. So cost becomes a very important issue, and the vaccines being produced in India have a global demand because most countries find that they are practical both in terms of delivery and affordability. How does corona vaccine compare to other vaccines? We must remember that the flu shot that we give every year, its efficacy varies from around 44 to 70 to 80%. Yet it's something that is given every year and has been shown to decrease mortality. So therefore, there is a utility in these vaccines, and they are comparable to vaccines that we have been routinely giving as far as various other viral infections are concerned. The major concern is that have been raised and future challenges are that this vaccine is injectable, and although they elicit a systemic immune response, they may not elicit a response in the upper respiratory tract. But now we have a nasal vaccine which is in preclinical stage, and this should be useful. The fear of enhancement of severity of disease after vaccination, this is no longer true because a large number of people have been vaccinated and this has not been shown as far as this vaccine is concerned. We don't know how long the protection will last and whether there will be repeated vaccination. This is a question that probably we'll get to know at the later part of this year. And similarly, the adverse effect of vaccination in those who have not been trialed, especially pregnant women and young children, is still unclear. And I hope that this data will also emerge and we will be able to actually start vaccinating young children soon, keeping in mind the fact that colleges and schools will open up and we need to make sure that they are also protected. Long-term adverse effect of COVID-19 vaccine, again, not known, not likely to be significant, but there needs to be follow-up as far as these novel platforms are concerned. Also, when we have having so many vaccines, it will become difficult to do vaccine trials because it will be unethical to do a phase 3 trial with a placebo arm. And therefore, one will have to look at what we call correlates of protection to really see how effective this vaccine is. And we will have to do what we call a non-inferiority trial rather than doing vaccine trials. I think the most important thing to remember is that this is the first time that we're looking at vaccinating the world, and it has financial, logistic, and social issues and challenges. And the pandemic will really be over when it's controlled globally, as we have seen happening in different parts of the world with mutant strains and variants coming up, which travel from one area to the other. They travel from UK to Europe, and now we have the South African strain also going across. So the pandemic has to be controlled globally. Regional control will really not get us out of this pandemic. Also, when we talk of a vaccine, we need to understand what are the endpoints. Are we looking at a vaccine which prevents infection, or are we looking at a vaccine which prevents disease? Most vaccines we know will prevent disease. You may have a mild disease, you may get or be asymptomatic, but you will not get severe disease requiring to really go to hospitalization or land up in ICU. But an ideal vaccine would be the one which will prevent infection, disease, and transmission, and that will really help to really bring down the pandemic. Some vaccines there is suggestion even as far as the AstraZeneca vaccine is concerned that it may prevent infection to some extent, but we need more data to say that vaccines prevent infection. They definitely prevent severe disease, and that's why it's important for all of us to really look at vaccination. For India, I think the important thing is that vaccination and not vaccines prevent infection and save lives. And therefore, prioritizing is important. It's important to see that the cold chain is maintained and vaccine hesitancy needs to be addressed. And this is not something which is new. Vaccine hesitancy has been there for hundreds of years. If you look at this painting from 1802, which is an artwork, which was when smallpox vaccine was introduced using cowpox. And there was this fear that since cowpox is being used, anyone who gets vaccinated will have the cow's horn, the cow's heads growing out of their body. And this is what has been depicted as a fear of getting the cowpox vaccine for the eradication of smallpox. If you look at what vaccine hesitancy is all about, there has been concern that among even this is from the nurses in the US, that vaccine development has occurred too quickly and therefore they're worried about its safety, that information is not available, or that they are not clear about the clinical trial process. And all of this has led to vaccine hesitancy. Also, the information that people get is usually from multi-stream media, TV, radio, newspaper, rather than looking at proper pre-reviewed journals or government officials or associations. And that also has led to misinformation causing vaccine hesitancy. There's also a concern that people look at the vaccine characteristics to decide about whether to take a vaccine or not. There are concerns about the approval process, too fast, or political influence. And of course, the source of information is also something which is not ideal as far as vaccine is concerned. And that makes people hesitate as far as vaccination is concerned. Data suggests that India is one of the countries where people are ready to get the vaccine. And that's why we really need to work on a strategy to roll it out in a big scale. This paper from the Lancet, which looked at multiple countries, suggested that 91% of persons are ready to get the vaccine from India, much higher than what is available in the Western world. And India is number 2. Number 1 is Vietnam, followed by India and China. And then we have Denmark, South Korea, and Brazil. So India, in terms of the survey, suggests a large number of the general populations actually wanting to get themselves vaccinated. Israel has shown that if you are able to vaccinate a large number of population, you are able to actually decrease your mortality and even decrease new cases significantly 2 weeks following the first dose, as per the health ministry data. Therefore, vaccination does really help in decreasing cases and as far as mortality is concerned. We need to really work on how we can improve vaccine uptake, build trust, provide relevant vaccine education, positive reinforcement, and work out a more robust delivery mechanism so that everyone who wants to be vaccinated can be vaccinated as early as possible. Look at spot registration or looking at short notices. India has worked hard since August to really develop a vaccination strategy. On the 7th of August, the NEGVAC, the National Expert Group for Vaccine Administration, was constituted. It had members from relevant ministries, from state government and technical expert. And all of us sat down and tried to develop strategies as far as this vaccine rollout was concerned. It was very clear that most vaccines have a 2-dose schedule. It was also clear at that point in time that although there would be multiple platforms as far as vaccine is concerned, they are not interchangeable, although research is being done to see whether interchangeable may make the vaccine more effective, and also that the beneficiary must complete vaccination schedule using the same vaccine product. The phase 1 was basically 30 crore population, healthcare workers, frontline worker, and prioritized age groups, more than 50 years of age and less than 50 years of age with associated comorbid condition, and a whole category of healthcare workers, not only doctors, resident, but even ASHA workers, ANMs, the technicians, the sanitation workers, and the other support staff was also included. And this also included medical and dental students. Undergraduate students were also part of the group to be vaccinated. Similarly, there was a whole category of frontline workers, and this list was further added to considering people from the Home Ministry, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and from state government. Various sessions were planned both in terms of healthcare workers, frontline workers, and prioritized groups, and it was felt that this could be expanded further to looking at vaccinations at schools, in community halls, gram panchayat, and even in municipalities. But starting off with the healthcare facilities to get confidence as far as the safety of the vaccine was concerned. And a whole allocation of work was given to various vaccinators or vaccination officers, 4 of them at each site, and they had a work allocation which was done to make sure that there was a smooth flow of vaccination, both for monitoring for the adverse effect and to see that it functions properly. The CoWIN app was created, and this was an upgradation of what was already there as far as the EVIN app was concerned. And this is a comprehensive end-to-end system which could be used for various other vaccination programs across the world. It looks at not only the cold chain maintenance, but also looks at the beneficiary and to see how it can benefit the beneficiary. So this looks at the mobile app, it looks at temperature logger, and looks at the beneficiary. All of this goes onto the CoWIN dashboard, and that's where most of the data is looked at and analyzed. So the CoWIN delivery system which India created looked at initial logistics, the phase 1, which was basically the vaccine coming from the manufacturer all the way up to the primary health center or to the vaccine sites, and making sure that the cold chain was maintained. The second phase was to look at how you could give the vaccine. So there was beneficiary registration, session allocation, and vaccination of the beneficiary. And the phase 3 was the acknowledgement, which was through an SMS, a unique health ID, a QR code, and monitoring for adverse effect following immunization. All of this was done through the CoWIN dashboard. So the CoWIN dashboard had automated session allocation, it had Aadhaar authentication, it created a unique health ID, adverse effect monitoring was also done, it had SMSs in 12 languages, QR code was created, it had a DigiLock system, a 24/7 helpline, and it had a chat box, it had a natural language processing mechanism, dry runs were already done, and a training using the IT platform was also part of the CoWIN platform. The government also initiated communication initiatives to really communicate with the public, and a large number of these activities was done, looking at various groups, individuals or influencers, community groups, and media were all involved in trying to see how we could reach out to the public in terms of the vaccine hesitancy and vaccine eagerness was concerned. Vaccine eagerness was also handled by acknowledging that there might be a degree of vaccine eagerness, but people would have to wait to get vaccine access. Key messages were given to the public, and accurate information was shared. Also, there were the program of handling vaccine hesitancy, which looked at community engagement, identifying traditional known vaccine hesitant and resistant areas, using data to influence people to come forward to take the vaccine, and developing various other means to really promote the vaccination and get over vaccine hesitancy. India has done remarkably well, and if you look at the total doses that have been administered, India is in the top 5 of having done more than 10 million doses, and this number keeps growing every year in terms of actual number of doses. However, if you start looking at the number of doses that India has been able to give per 100 persons, then because of the size of our population, we are not in the top list because of the fact that our population is much larger, and therefore we really need to ramp up our vaccine distribution in a big way, considering the size of our country. AIIMS has also been involved. So finally, I'll just wind up by just telling the vaccine drive and giving you an overview of how this is done across the country. We have a vaccination site in our outpatient area, which is for the staff. A flow chart has been created, so how the individual will go from one area to the other. At the point of entry, it is manned by the vaccine officer 1, who verifies your photo ID, and then also gives a wristband and a token for a regular flow of the vaccination schedule, because we are having 5 vaccination sites, and at times vaccinating more than 500 people a day. Subsequently, the beneficiary sits in the vaccine. The person who has to get the vaccine sits in the screening area, where a consent sheet is given and information is provided by the nursing doctor and resident doctors. Doubts are clarified and necessary information is given. The person data is then entered in the CoWIN portal, which is to establish and is confirmed by the vaccinator. Subsequently, the vaccination is given at that site, and the person is then observed for half an hour in the vaccination room, where the nursing staff is there and a doctor is there to monitor for any adverse effect following immunization. This is our staff which is there posted to look for any adverse effect. And we have one room which is for any severe adverse effect, which is manned by our sisters for any side effect which may happen in terms due to the vaccination. So this has now started, and I'm very confident that over the next few weeks, we will achieve a significant target as far as phase 1 is concerned. Thank you very much.
Dr. Guleria, thank you so much. You know, there were so many questions in everyone's mind. And it's also good to raise the awareness on actually what our country's vaccination strategy is, what is available, and how, you know, your rationale, your planning has been put together. So thank you so much. It was one of the most amazing presentations I've seen of late. Of course, you know, with good work and great work, there's a lot of interest among the public. There's a lot of interest among our key stakeholders at IMA. And there have been a lot of questions which have come up. And one of the main questions is, you know, going forward, what are the specific measures you would suggest, both to the government, to the private sector healthcare industry, that we're not faced with the kind of public health crisis which we faced in the past 12 months? And do you think something should change both in the private sector, in the public sector, and maybe at AIIMS itself? So are there any thoughts which, you know, we should be discussing?
Yes, I think there has been a lot of learning as far as the COVID-19 pandemic has been concerned. And I think we should sort of not lose whatever we've learned once the pandemic starts becoming less, and see how there can be better collaboration between the private sector, the public sector, how we can look at what the Prime Minister says is having Atmanirbhar Bharat, because what we realized in the pandemic was that very often you have to do what is available in your own country. We had shortage of PPEs because they were being imported, N95 masks, and even ventilators, because they were not available in our country. And during a pandemic, we had to rely on other countries, and these countries were not providing these ventilators or these equipments. Even diagnostics became a challenge. So we have to become self-reliant in many ways, and we have to put health at the center stage. Health is something that is very important because it affects all areas as far as the economy is concerned, as far as livelihood is concerned. And it is something which should be looked as a sector which can actually generate and push the economy rather than looking at it only as a service sector. So there has to be good collaboration, and I think we should become not only the medical research hub, but even the patient care hub for the world. And I think India has the capacity to do that. For vaccination, there is still a lot that we need to do, and I think there has to be more and more public-private partnership.
That's very encouraging, Dr. Guleria. Again, you know, uppermost in people's minds, and I know that you have a plan to do the healthcare, the frontline workers first, and then open it up to the public. So I think the question keeps coming up, you know, there's a sense of urgency. When will senior citizens, people with comorbid conditions, when will they start, you know, getting the vaccination? How will you allow the private sector to really supplement the government's work? And then is there some kind of a lack of trust in the indigenously developed vaccine? These are the questions which keep coming up again, you know, from our viewers. Could you throw some light on that?
Yes, so I think there is a need now to gradually start opening up once we have everything in place, because vaccinating healthcare workers and frontline workers is probably the easy part as far as the phase 1 is concerned, because you have the list, you have know who's to be vaccinated, and the number is not that large. Once you reach the number of trying to vaccinate 27 crore individuals, it's a huge number because you have to give 2 doses of the vaccine. So we must have a robust program in place where you have the list of all those who need to be vaccinated. If they're not on the list, how can they come onto the list? If they are the beneficiaries, they need to get the vaccine. And we need to develop a mechanism where we have the private sector and the public sector actually rolling out the vaccine on a large scale. Also, we have to balance that out with the capacity that is available, like is showed in the slide, because currently there has to be, we are in a situation where the demand is more than what the capacity is. Once we have a situation where the demand and the capacity match each other, then it's very easy for the vaccine to even be available in the market for that matter. But currently the capacity is less than the demand, and therefore a strategy needs to be developed. But I do agree that there is now an urgency to roll out the vaccine to a large number of people, especially the fact that there is some degree of vaccine hesitancy in healthcare workers and frontline workers, and therefore doses are available and we should use them as much as early as possible. I personally feel that we have a window of opportunity right now because our cases are down, but this can change anytime, as we've seen in various parts of the world, especially with the new variants coming up in different countries. And therefore, we should not lose this moment and try and vaccinate a large number of our own citizens, which will be able to provide some degree of protection as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Remember, we still don't have an effective antiviral drug. So treatment strategy is still not ideal as we would like it to be. So the only weapon that we have actually is the vaccine. Coming to this, the other part that you asked regarding trust as far as the Bharat Biotech vaccine is concerned, I think now there is data also published in Lancet, which has shown that there is good amount of neutralizing antibodies and T-cell immunity that the vaccine produces. Safety data is already there. This is a platform which we use for many vaccines, including the influenza vaccine. It's not a new platform. And now more than 25,000 people have been vaccinated, not only in phase 3 trial, but even otherwise, large number of individuals have got the Covaxin vaccine as part of the rollout plan, and there has been no significant side effects. So side effects is now something that we need not worry about. There is published data as far as efficacy is concerned. One is hopeful that in the next few weeks, we will get the phase 3 data also out and published in a peer-reviewed journal. So I think, like I said, this is just a small window that we have before things may worsen, and therefore we should take whatever vaccine we get and immunize ourselves, have enough neutralizing antibodies so that we are able to decrease mortality and really not have another spike in our country.
I think we have time for just one last question. But going forward, so much of science has come together to produce stuff like this. What role has AI played in dealing with the crisis, developing the vaccine, and maybe for us to do prediction, to predict the onset of disease? How do you look at it going forward?
I think AI is there to really make a big difference as far as the medical sector is concerned. Even during COVID-19, a lot of projects were done which showed how AI could be useful. In our own institute, we had a student, a young faculty who has done her training also in IIT Delhi, develop an AI which was very useful, because looking at a chest X-ray, you could really say whether there's a high chance of COVID-19 or not before even your RT-PCR report came. And similarly, AI was used in predicting or using it in base models. AI can also be used when it comes to seeing how one can develop and look at new vaccine platforms. So I think in the future, there will be a lot of use as far as AI is concerned in medicine. In many ways, I feel we doctors have been slow to adopt technology as our counterparts, let's say, in the engineering sector and other sectors. But that is changing rapidly, and the pandemic showed us the importance of telemedicine, teleconsultation, using various devices to really be able to monitor people at home without having to come for a physical checkup. So a lot of things have now sort of moved forward because of COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Guleria. I wish we had, more time, but I think in the time which we had, the learning has been enormous, and there's a level of confidence which we have built within our systems. There's either Atmanirbhar or the fact that there is Ayushman Bharat, but the fact is that we are geared up to really treat our countrymen and provide healthcare for the neighboring countries. So I think you covered all this in your session, and there is a level of confidence which I think has been phenomenal. I would love to close the session by again saying thank you so much for the multiple things which you have done for the country and made us proud to be Indians. Thank you, and looking forward to seeing you again soon in the future.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.